What's up? Welcome to Gordo on the F Words, or the F Words with Gordo. I'm your host, Gordo, and this episode I'm going to talk about finishing Better Call Saul. I watched the end of the series like a week ago. Here's going to be all my thoughts. I'm going to tell you about the show. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. If you haven't watched the show, don't listen to this episode. Skip the next one, go to a previous one, because I'm going to talk about all this crazy crap that happens in the show. And it's spoiler heavy. Now, if you have watched it, definitely check it out. I'm going to talk about thoughts. I'm going to tie in other things. When I watch shows like this, I like to not like look at my own life, but I do think characters are extreme examples of things and people that exist in life. And it kind of helps us to be like, oh, I want to be more like that or less like that. And I think it's really important to watch shows, read books, watch movies that can help us identify those traits. And yeah, Better Call Saul has very strong characters to help us determine some of those things. So this show is fun to watch. I'll explain like my whole review basically. And let me know in the reviews. Did you watch it? Some people don't jive with Better Call Saul, Breaking Bad type stuff. Have you seen it? Have you not? And do you plan on watching it? Let me know. Okay, thanks. Here's the episode. Greetings. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Today, I'm going to talk about Better Call Saul, the hit TV show with Bob Odenkirk. That's a spinoff of Breaking Bad. I did a previous podcast talking about the lead up to the finish and what it was like watching it leading up to like the final season. And I just recently finished it. And so I want to debrief my thoughts and they kind of go into what makes a great TV show and what makes Better Call Saul a great TV show. So I first tried watching, this is crazy, Breaking Bad way back in like 2009, maybe. My brother was like, Gordo, you should watch Breaking Bad. And I was like, at the time, I wasn't really watching like more serious like subject matter TV shows. And I was like, I'm not really into that. He's like, no. You got to watch the first 3 episodes. I guarantee you watch the first 3 episodes and you're addicted. You're hooked. So I watched first 3 episodes and I was like, yeah, I'm not really doing it for me. So I didn't watch it while it was out. And then I was at my uncle's house and he literally he was watching the last episode before the finale. And I was like, oh, this is pretty intense. And then a year later, I was at my friend's house and he was watching a specific episode called Box Cutter. If you guys have seen Breaking Bad, you know what happens in that episode. And I sat down and watched it. I was like, whoa, this is intense. This is crazy. So I decided to start watching the show. That was in 2014. So it was after the whole show was done, blitzed through it. And I was like, holy crap, this is probably the best show of TV I've ever seen in my entire life. And then 2016, Better Call Saul came out. I watched the first season and I was like, oh, this is a little slow, a little dry, and you had Saul Goodman, who's going by his birth name, Jimmy McGill, and you had Mike Ehrmantraut, both from Breaking Bad. But it was, slow. But I stuck with it because it was still really, really good. Writing was good, acting was great, but it just, you finish Breaking Bad and you get to the end of Breaking Bad, how high the stakes are, all the intensity happens, especially season 4, season 5. And you start Better Call Saul and it's a much different pace. It is a crazy pace. But I got through it. And so I watched all the seasons as they were coming out. First 4 seasons. There's 6 seasons in total for Better Call Saul. And then I just kind of stopped. Because what would happen is I would watch a season And when I go to see the next season, I forget not everything, but a bulk of what happened in the previous seasons. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to wait for the whole show to come out and I'll watch the whole thing. And then in 2024, my wife and I were just finishing up. We had a beef jerky business, and there's some really monotonous tasks when you're making beef jerky, literally, I kid you not, for 18 hours a day. And one is you have to slice every single piece of beef to turn it into jerky. And so you're sitting there slicing. It's nice to have like a podcast or a show in the background. So I said, you know what? I'm going to watch Better Call Saul. I want to finish that show and see exactly what happens here. So started watching it again on like 1.5x because you can speed up on the Netflix app on your phone, which I would never do for a show I'm watching the first time or a movie. But when there's 6 seasons of TV to get through, I'm okay with like blitzing and getting through those seasons that I've seen already quickly. And it was super good. You know, when you go and you watch them back to back, you see a lot of what makes it a great show. And what I love about Better Call Saul is that it is not huge budget explosions that make it great. It's not like weird, like they're not paying high paid movie actors to come in and be the drawing force behind this. But the characters are excellent. So the acting is really, really great. The writing is really, really great. The dialogue is great. And something that I'm appreciating more and more that you can do on a budget is great cinematography and great music. If you can find someone that can pick music well, like you don't have to spend that much money. Like those are things that comparatively to a big car chase and car crash, that's going to cost you a lot of money. To have great actors and great writing, I mean, it still will cost you money, but it doesn't cost you like per second the same amount that those other things will. And that's what's beautiful about Better Call Saul. There's some like action things, there's some like things, sure, but it's the character development, it's the writing, it's the acting, it's cinematography. You get introduced to Saul Goodman's brother, who is just such a stark contrast to Saul Goodman, again, Jimmy McGill in the TV show, because he's a straight-laced, by-the-book lawyer. And there's a couple of scenes. There's one in season 1 at the end of season 1. Saul Goodman, Jimmy McGill, is just wrestling to build a law practice, to be a competent lawyer, to make a living at this. His brother is in the twilight of his law career, and he built this huge law firm, and he's basically off on this medical leave for this pseudo psychosomatic like illness that he has. Anyway, and so you're going through and you're thinking that Chuck is supporting. I should stop right now. Well, I'll put spoiler alert in the intro, but just a reminder, there's going to be spoilers here. And so through the whole first season, you think that Chuck is Team Jimmy and wants to see his brother do well. And the only reason why Jimmy couldn't work at Chuck, the brother's law firm, is because of the other partners. Chuck wanted him to work there, but the other partners wouldn't allow it. And the other partner that you know in the show is a guy named Howard, who just is like, he's in good shape. He wears expensive suits, drives an expensive car, seems really, comes across really arrogant. And you get through the whole first season, and then Jimmy realizes, oh, this isn't because of Howard. This is because of Chuck. And he confronts Chuck that, hey, it wasn't because of Howard that I couldn't work at your law firm. It's because of you, isn't it? And Chuck just like lays into him and says, and so Jimmy's history is a con man. Like he would fake injuries to get money. He would go into bars to con people out of like a few dollars here and there. But his brother says Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a monkey with a machine gun. And it was just this very powerful scene. And you go, whoa, there's all that. And then you kind of continue through the show. And now and then you find out Howard was actually Team Jimmy. Howard would have really liked to hire Jimmy at the law firm because he was like, because Jimmy got his law degree going to school at nights, doing distance ed while working full time. And this Howard guy was actually like he was like, I would have loved to have hired you, but your brother wouldn't allow it. And I just, because of the dynamics, like I had to be the bad guy and tell you we couldn't hire you. It's crazy. And then you get into like season 2 and you get some of the other characters from Breaking Bad, like Gus Fring shows up. Tuco Salamanca is in the first season. And it just kind of builds from there. And so you keep seeing like Saul Goodman build, and you don't really know where it's going. Like and that's what's crazy too, is you kind of see this conflicted person of a person who's trying to make his brother proud, a person who's trying to make like a name for himself, a guy who wants to get out from this Slippin' Jimmy like mantle. It's like this mantle that he is fulfilling that is on him. And it's almost like no matter what he does, he can't get out of this and get away from it. Anyway, I kind of said this on another episode. So you go through the whole show, and just what continually striked me while watching it is the acting. Chuck, the guy that plays Chuck, was amazing. He's only in the first 3 seasons, and then there's a couple cameos later. There's like a cameo when they're celebrating that Jimmy got his law degree. There's a cameo in the very series finale, which is like very interesting. Anyway, and there's like, and then you still have these great characters of Mike and Jimmy, Saul Goodman. And this is what's crazy too. I didn't realize this, that a bunch of the characters they build out in Better Call Saul have like ties back to Breaking Bad. Like when Saul Goodman first gets connected to Walter White and Jesse Pinkman, they kidnap him, take him out to the desert, and kneel him in front of an open grave. And this is in Breaking Bad before Better Call Saul ever came out. He yells, he's like, "Who sent you? Was it?" He's like, "It wasn't me. I didn't do it. It was Ignacio. Did Lalo send you?" Ignacio also goes by the name Nacho, and they introduce him in season 1 of Better Call Saul. And then Lalo is Tuco Salamanca's cousin, and they introduce him in season 4. I think season 4. And Lalo Salamanca, again, like Ignacio Nacho Varga, he's a good character. But Lalo, there's something really striking about his charismaticness and his, like, how he portrayed this character who was like hyper capable, hyper charismatic, but also very like sociopathic. Like he just killed people, wouldn't even care. And again, you get these like characters, and what's interesting is you kind of get these different characters who are willing to go farther in different values of life, basically. Like you have Chuck, who is like, regardless of personal experience, the law must be upheld, or personal relationships, the law must be upheld. The law is a driving force for everything that we do. But then you have like Saul Goodman, who's like, sees that and I think wants to do that, but is also like life is for our benefit. Like we have to get what we want we have to get what feels good, maybe is more hedonistic than what Chuck would be. And then you get someone like Lalo, who is like, basically like Lalo does to an extent what Jimmy does, what Saul Goodman does, but to a 10 times higher degree, where because Jimmy never kills anyone in the whole show. Saul Goodman never kills anyone in the whole show. But Lalo does. And he just kills people for like briefly getting in his way at all. And it was like, and I think that like that creates a threat. That person creates a threat that is very intimidating and scary when you have other people on the show that have these values that are, even though Jimmy would be still a conflicted person, like Saul Goodman is like not really a good person, but he won't like murder someone to get what benefits him. He'll con people and he'll put down other people on his way to get himself up, but he won't kill someone. Which is very interesting, you know? And so you get through the show and you get to the end of season 5 and they're building this really great arc. So you get to season 6. You have some of these characters have come and gone. Some of the characters are still around. There's some new characters. And I would say I found season 6 a bit challenging. I was really looking forward. Oh, and then they do this thing where at the start of every season 1, season 2, season 3, and season 4, you have this black and white kind of mini episode, because you have Breaking Bad took place here and Better Call Saul happened in the past. But at the start of every season, they have this black and white section that happens in the future after Breaking Bad. And just like little things happen every single time. So you're like, well, what happens to Saul Goodman? What happens to Saul Goodman? Where does he end up after Breaking Bad? What happens with his life? So you get through, and I think season 6 is about 13 episodes. I think every other season is 10 episodes. And after the 10th episode in Better Call Saul, it turns black and white. And instead of these mini episodes at the start of each season, you get 3 or maybe 4 full episodes in the future. And Kim Wexler, who is Saul Goodman's love interest and kind of his counterpart, who's trying to make him a better person, but also is like, she gets substantial fulfillment participating in the con man aspect of Jimmy. Like basically you get to the end of season 6 and they're like, yeah, you get to the end of season 6 and Howard gets killed by Lalo. Suddenly, abruptly, Jimmy and Kim have just spent this whole season like basically torturing Howard in terms of like degrading his name and personhood, where they were ruining his reputation by faking all of these things and making it look like Howard was an awful person. And Howard shows up at their apartment to confront them. And they're like, Howard, you'll be fine. And he's like, everyone thinks I'm a drug addict now. You don't know what you've done. And then Lalo comes in and the whole situation gets 100 times more tense, except Lalo is there, very calm. And he's like, finish talking, guys. And then he just like shoots Howard in the head. You're like, oh. And it's like Jimmy and Kim both freak out because they didn't want Howard to die. They just wanted to con him and make themselves seem better in the process. And then from there, they don't really recover from that. Like they kind of separate and go their own ways. And then that moves up to the point of Kim goes all the way to Florida and tries to create this very comparatively boring life. She does like admin for a sprinkler company. Jimmy's way up in Nebraska under new alias, like new pseudonym for who he is. But someone identifies Saul Goodman in Nebraska. And then Saul starts running these cons with these guys. And eventually he gets caught by the mother, this lady on a little scooter, the mother of one of the guys he's running the cons with. And then he gets caught by the feds. And you kind of get through season 6 and you're like, the way I was feeling was, I don't know if this is finishing in the most satisfying way for me. Like, I don't necessarily love, because the thing I didn't love about season 6 was Jimmy and Kim, they're just like harassing Howard for the whole season. You kind of get more out of Mike Ehrmantraut, Gus Fring, but when it comes to Jimmy and Kim, you're like, the way I felt was, I don't understand exactly why they're going to this length. Like, Howard's he's kind of a, for lack of a better term, pardon my language, he's kind of a douchebag. But also kind of caught in the crosshairs a little bit through the, well, no, he's not perfect. Because Kim used to work at his law firm and he was a jerk to Kim. But then they're like tossing bowling balls on his car over a fence and they're making him look like a drug addict. And they are doing all these things that I was kind of like, man, they're doing this for the whole season. I don't fully understand exactly why they're doing this, like why this is the most important thing to finish season 6 on. And then he gets killed suddenly. And yeah, I think Kim and Jimmy were both kind of tortured by that. It's like, it was okay to do whatever you wanted to him, but not kill him. And then when he was murdered, and he's kind of murdered, and it's kind of their fault because Jimmy does some lawyering for the Mexican cartel. And eventually, to be fair, outside of his control and preference, he gets like connected to Lalo, defends him in court, and gets him out of jail. And he just, every time he's like, we're done, right? We're done. And Lalo's like, basically, we're done when I say we're done. And, if they hadn't been harassing Howard wouldn't have come to their apartment to confront them. If he hadn't come over to confront them, he wouldn't have been there at the same time as Lalo. And Lalo wouldn't have killed him. So there is some like agency they have, I think, in that in that happening. And you get to this black and white stuff, and they're both just trying to figure out their lives because they're both living. Kim and Jimmy are both living hollow shells of lives. By the time you get to this black and white episodes at the end of season 6, and Kim can't live with herself. Because then there was this fake story made, like Howard wasn't murdered by the cartel. Howard, the Gus Fring's men come in and they clean the whole apartment and they take the body and drive his car to the ocean and make it look like he drowned himself, committed suicide. And so then Kim goes back to Albuquerque from Florida, to try to make things right. So she signs like a statement saying this is what actually happened, tells Howard's wife, and then Jimmy gets caught by the feds. And, they find out it's him, and he's sitting there. What's really funny, actually, this was really funny, and there's always like little things of this through the whole show, was at the start of the show, Jimmy was a public defender. And he's always going at it with a district attorney who is prosecuting criminals on behalf of the state and working out deals. And the district attorney always seems to have a leg up on Jimmy. And then Jimmy goes to a private law firm and he gets a huge salary, huge car. And so it's like, boom, now he's above this district attorney. And district attorney's like, oh, man, that's so sick. You got a company car. That's sick. Oh, man, you're living the good life. And then they kind of like this, the district attorney stays the same. And then Jimmy's just bouncing. He's Jimmy McGill. He's Saul Goodman. He's bouncing all over the place. And then you get to season 6 and it turns out that the district attorney is now not a public defender, because public defender is funded by the state, right? If you can't afford an attorney, one will be provided for you by the state. But he becomes like a defense lawyer for hire. So he like switches to the other team. Basically, he goes from being a district attorney, and when he's over here, he's arguing against defense attorneys. Now he's a defense attorney. So Jimmy gets arrested. First call he makes, hey, what's the guy's name? Jim? I think it was Jim. Like, hey, you're my defense attorney. Get here to Nebraska right now. It's going to be the biggest case in the whole, because Jimmy's been like America's Most Wanted since the end of Breaking Bad. So then it's just Jimmy, and then no, it's not Jim. What's the other guy's name? I can't remember his name. It's like balding dude, and Bill, and it's Jimmy and Bill, and then like 10 people on the other side of the table, because they're basically at the negotiation stage. Like, you're going to go to jail. They're saying things like you're going to go to jail for 186 years because they're listing all of the charges against him and what the maximum sentence is. And then Jimmy has a conversation. They bring a witness in. They bring in Hank Schrader's wife. Hank Schrader dies at the end of Breaking Bad and made a cameo in Better Call Saul. And they bring his wife in to basically like have a conversation with Jimmy in front of everyone. This isn't in court. Like I said, this isn't like mediation, I guess, or whatever, preliminary hearing, something. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But and then Jimmy starts saying how he didn't want to do any of the stuff he did in Breaking Bad, that he did it because he thought Walter White was going to kill him at any moment. It could have killed him anyway. And the district attorney that's presiding over this case said, "You really think jury's going to believe that?" And then Saul says, he's like fake crying, and he's like, "Well, I only need one, don't I? I just need one juror to believe me." And then Saul says to the district attorney, "Hey, I've heard you've never lost a case." And he kind of like flips this thing around where he's showing that he doesn't need, that it's like he's not the one in the hot seat. The district attorney is, because the district attorney has this high profile case, biggest case in years in the US. And if he messes it up and Saul Goodman doesn't go to jail, then it could ruin his career. So then it kind of like cuts forward, and they're negotiating a plea deal where Saul is going to go to jail for like 7 years at this minimum security golf prison in North Carolina or something like that. And they work it all out. And then starts telling them, "Oh, I got one more piece of information, but if you want this, you got to bring me mint chocolate chip ice cream once a week." And then starts talking about Lalo killing Howard. And they said, "Oh, Kim Wexler already told us this. We don't need this." Anyway, but he still has a plea deal for 7 years or whatever. And then he said they get out, and then he leaks info to the district attorneys that I got one big piece of info on Kim Wexler that the district attorneys are going to go crazy about. So they get to jail. Jimmy's got his flashy suit. Even though it's black and white, you can still see it's flashy. And so you're just like, wow, Saul's going to get away with this. He's just going to spend 7 years in North Carolina prison because he's like that good of a negotiator. He's like that good of a con man. And then you get to this final hearing where basically all that has to happen is the judge stamps the plea deal, and Kim Wexler is in the crowd section of the courtroom. And then Jimmy just starts telling the truth for basically the first time in the show. He just tells the truth. He said, I felt threatened by Walter White, but that's not the reason I did that work. I did the work because I saw the opportunity to make millions of dollars. And he looks at Kim in the courtroom and he's like, "Oh yeah, and I lied about her. Like I said, she had some involvement or some whatever, but that's not true. She's like totally innocent and free of stuff. And then just like goes on to say all the stuff that he did and completely ruins his plea deal. His defense attorney's like, Your Honor, I strongly recommend this is stricken from the record. And then Jimmy's telling his defense lawyer, like, Bill, sit down. Like, let me get this out. And then he gets through all of this stuff. He like comes clean, basically all this stuff in his life. He even says one thing. He's like, I'm not even sure why I said that, but I had to get that out. And then he said, you know what? With my brother, Chuck McGill was the best lawyer I ever knew. And I killed him. You know, I didn't kill him, but I, ruined his like liability insurance, and they wouldn't insure him. And so he couldn't be a lawyer anymore. And without being a lawyer, he killed himself. And I think that's because of me. And that's the last thing he says. He sits down and his defense lawyer, Bill, is like, why'd you say the last thing? Like, that's not a crime. But because that last hearing wasn't about the crimes. It was about Jimmy just like being honest for the first time in his life, I think. And cuts forward and he's on a bus, but instead of going to North Carolina golf prison for 7 years, earlier in the episode, he references this really tough prison. And there's like a sign that says da-da-da prison, and that's the way he's going. But then all these guys on the bus start recognizing, he's like, hey, you're Saul Goodman. And they're like, Saul. They love this guy because he's like a defense lawyer for a lot of years, like helping criminals get out of, like, kind of like criminals love him because they should have gone to jail or been in bad situation. He would get them out of it. And then he goes to jail and he's like making pizza or bread and he's doing his thing. And guard comes in and says, hey, Jimmy, you got your lawyer's here. And he goes to the room and Kim Wexler is there. And the thing is, earlier in the season, after the stuff with Howard, Kim resigned as a lawyer, resigned from the bar. She's not a lawyer anymore. And she said, yeah, my bar card, New Mexico Bar Association card, doesn't have an expiry date. So they just let me in. And they go off the corner of the room. And they would always do this thing where they would just occasionally they would smoke a cigarette together. And it was just like their secret habit. And so they go off and they start smoking. They haven't said anything. And she says, wow, so 86 years. Basically, like, all they do is just kind of talk a little bit, smoke a cigarette. And it was kind of like she was like acknowledging that he did the right thing finally, I think. And as she's walking out, he sees her from the basketball court and does like some finger guns, and she just like kind of satisfyingly like leaves, and that's the end of the show. And it's kind of like I've had to sit on this. I think I watched this a week ago or 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I don't like this ending. I don't like this ending of the show. I don't like this ending to like the Breaking Bad narrative. I'm not digging this. But then as it's like sat with me more, the like power that's resonated there is like that despite all this stuff Jimmy went through, all the stuff that he did, the person he was for his entire life, the person he was to his brother, the person he tried to not be, but inevitably was, I think it's not that Jimmy isn't that person, but I think the point of the end of Better Call Saul is that Saul got what he deserved. That Saul is Slippin' Jimmy. Like, his brother was right that Slippin' Jimmy with a law degree is like a monkey with a machine gun. And you see when Hank Schrader's wife comes in and talks about Hank and Agent Gomez being dead, and I think Howard dying, like these things show, and Chuck dying, these things show that even though Saul never killed anyone, that that his actions did devastatingly hurt people. And the whole point of that final arc in that last episode is that he got what he deserved, and that he is who he is. Now, in terms of life, I don't necessarily love that. I think there's power in like recognizing that we are who we are, but I don't necessarily love that sometimes we don't really make room that people can change. I think people can. I think people have to like be given opportunities, because I do think sometimes people are, I think sometimes people are products of their environment. I think sometimes they are nurtured. It's not their nature to be who they are sometimes. But then I think at the same time that we have to have boundaries, and you can only give people so many chances. I think it's like very fair and noble to give people chances. Like, I'm a Christian. Technically, every Christian has had not just a second chance, but like infinite second chances from God. And I think to give people grace is very important and powerful. And I think there's consequences for actions too. Like, I think that's kind of maybe another point of the end of the show is that it's not that Jimmy is inherently an evil person. It's not that he is inherently the worst person ever. But he's not a great person, and his actions hurt people, and he doesn't care about that all the time. And that there's consequences for his actions, and that, you can't, there's like some actions or some mistakes you can't erase. Cause that's one thing he was really good at. He could go and do something and he could erase it and turn around and fix it. He'd use that language a lot. I'll fix this. And Kim at one point said, I don't need you to fix it. I don't want you to fix it. And, I think, it makes you wonder if he went to jail like earlier in his life. Cause the whole reason he gets to Albuquerque is because he is arrested and he is in jail in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia. Chuck goes and gets him out of jail and says, like, I'm going to get you out of jail, but you gotta come with me to Albuquerque and get a real job and live a real life. So he gets a job at the law firm that Chuck owns in the mailroom. And then he works himself up and he's like, I want to be like you, Chuck. I want to be a lawyer. And Chuck, you find out no matter what Jimmy does, he would never recognize Jimmy as a real lawyer. And then the thing is, instead of proving him wrong, he like proves him right, kind of, which is unfortunate. Anyway. And so I think, I think Better Call Saul is a great show. It's not better than Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad's probably the best show ever. And I don't say that like, oh, it's the best show ever. I love it. Breaking Bad's like a hard show to watch. Like, there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on. Physical violence, manipulation, criminal activity. But you have to be able to appreciate the progressions of characters through that show. And it's kind of the same here. You kind of already know who Saul Goodman is, but you get like a full picture and you get to see how his actions impacted people before Breaking Bad and after. And like, I think when I watch shows like this, I kind of hope for a few things to happen. Like, one, I kind of hope that my mind is blown a little bit, or two, I hope to see like what humans can go through and who they can become and where they come from. Because I think what it kind of helps us do is usually characters in TV shows are very extreme in more narrow bands of what a human can be. Like, I think most people in life are pretty, not like diverse necessarily, but there's like a lot of aspects to people and the bands are a little shallower. Whereas in books and TV shows and movies, you get less bands, but they're like, this is who these people are. And so that's why sometimes we can identify with them, because there's like maybe pieces that can align. Like I think for me with Jimmy, where I can find a lot of empathy is that, it's just me and my brother, and there's nothing else in the world I would love more than for us to both be healthy and successful and live vibrant, healthy lives, and to get along and to have a good relationship. Right now, it's not the case. And you kind of see that for Jimmy and Chuck, and they both want to be connected. The scene at the very end of the show, it flashes back, and Jimmy at the beginning of the show is always bringing food and supplies over to Chuck because Chuck has a really hard time leaving his house. And so it's at the start of this illness, and Chuck said, Jimmy, you don't have to do this. I can get someone at the law firm to bring me stuff. And Jimmy's like, nah, man, you do the same thing for me, which you kind of see. I don't think Chuck would. And then Chuck says, what law cases do you have going on? Like, we could review them together. I could help you with them. And then Jimmy says, he's like, yeah, right, Chuck. You just want to tell me I'm doing it wrong. Kind of tongue in cheek, kind of like confrontational. And Chuck says, man, there's like this tone in his voice. And he says, that's not what I meant. But he kind of like says it big and then resigns himself to know that in the same way that he looks at his brother in the same way all the time, his brother looks at him in the same way all the time. And he said, so when he says, that's not what I meant, and then kind of gets quiet when he says meant, it was just a very powerful moment that you don't see like at the beginning of their relationship. And I think what's like nice about the ending of Better Call Saul is in life, I believe that everyone gets what's coming to them. That's always like using a bad term, but I believe that like as Christians, we believe that you reap what you sow. And I think like whether it's in this life or the next, people will reap what they sow, and that it's infinitely better to sow good things than bad things. Some people don't view it that way. Some people view that, there's this line in this movie called Cloud Atlas where, Cloud Atlas is such a random reference because so many people hated that movie. I thought the movie's great. It's probably top 10 favorite movie of all time for me. And this dude in the 1800s is conning this other dude. And he says at one point after they figure out what's happening and he recognizes he's trying to con him and whatever, kill him, he says, the weak are meat and the strong do eat. And there's some people that live their lives with that. Like the weak are meat and the strong do eat. And I just don't believe that. I believe there's enough for everyone to go around. I believe that if you help someone, that it comes back to you properly. I think if you're always truthful, that truth begets truth and truth begets honesty, and that's always the way to go. And you can't, like, unfortunately, if someone lies to you or you lie to someone and then that person finds out or you find out, the problem is that person will always wonder if you're being truthful after that point. And like, that's kind of the case for Jimmy. Is his brother knew him to be Slippin' Jimmy and says at one point, like, you'll never change. Like, you are who you are. And Jimmy like wants to prove him wrong, but then kind of just never does. Some of the things Jimmy does is not inherently lying or inherently bad, but is kind of maybe more gray than like black or white. But the problem is he doesn't really, he just naturally slides down the scale towards being gray and like in the black, I guess, which is, again, an important lesson, I think, is like, it's important to tell the truth. It's important to be the best way you can do. And it's important to not leverage people to give yourself a better life, but to live your best life and potentially work to give other people the best lives they can as much as it's within your control. And that just telling the truth and helping people is exponentially more powerful and beneficial for you and for other people. As soon as you tell a lie, actually, that's not necessarily true. As soon as you get caught in a lie, those people that catch you will never believe you again. And so to just be honest, it's way more powerful, I think. So yeah, that's the show. I mean, it's a 63 episode show. Multiply that by 42 minutes or whatever. It's a haul. And this is like my struggle with TV shows too. If you pick a movie or a movie series, like 63 hours of movies is a lot of movies. Let's say they're all 2 hours. It's 30 movies. That's the whole infinity, what's the term? The Infinity Gauntlet arc, Infinity Stone arc for Marvel. But TV shows, you got to commit time, right? And so there's shows that they're like 300 episodes. I don't even know where to start with that. And what I like too about Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, these shorter shows, 60, 50 episodes, you don't get all this fluff. Like a lot of network TV, they would have 24 to 27 episode seasons. You gotta get through a lot of fluff to like get through the good stuff sometimes. And these shows you don't have to. So yeah, I definitely recommend watch Breaking Bad, watch Better Call Saul if you're looking for great shows. There is mature content, there's swearing, there's violence. But if you like seeing two things, if you like seeing the progression of characters and people, it's amazing. And then if you like seeing a show that relies on acting, writing, and cinematography, man, I don't think there's better shows out there. The cinematography, there's one scene in season 6 where Jimmy is trying to, oh man, how did it work? He parked his car and he drove out. And so the camera is mounted on the car door looking at Jimmy's side profile, and he forgot a pylon. So he backs out. So the camera's on him and you're just watching him back out, drive forward. He opens the door and the door has a perfect view. The camera has a perfect view of the pylon. And so you see him get out of the car, get the pylon, throw it in the car, get back in, closes it. It's right on him again. Like that must have taken, maybe some people are natural and they can just set that shot up perfectly, but that must have taken hours to get the exact right angle, camera, and even door position, opening and closing. I'm assuming the door wasn't actually opening and closing, and they must have rigged some kind of different door so that it would open at the right positions and close the right positions. But it's just phenomenal. And it's really nice focusing on Mike Ehrmantraut as well. Like Mike Ehrmantraut is the definition of, because this is something too, the older I get, the more I struggle with charismatic personalities, which is not fair to all charismatic people. Like I have a touch of charismaticness in social settings, but the problem is that charismaticness can mask and hide a lot of ulterior personality traits. And that's also a contrast here is you get Jimmy McGill, Saul Goodman, who is charismatic, con man, and leverages that to his power. And then you get Mike Ehrmantraut, and Mike Ehrmantraut is not I mean, you could say that there is a sense of charismaticness around him, but he's not charismatic in the same way. He'll give you one word answers. He doesn't say more than he needs to, and he just gets stuff done. And I think there's so much power there. Again, going back to that truth concept, Jimmy Saul is always lying, and he's lying upon his lies to keep his lies going. And Mike is just extremely truthful and extremely effective. And he doesn't beat around the bush. He just tells you what's truthful, shows you what he can do, and gets it done. And I think that's something, I don't want to be Mike Ehrmantraut, but there's aspects of that I want to be more like. I don't want to have to convince you with my words that I can do something. I just want to show you, like, here's my body of proof of what I can do. I don't want to have to rely on being charismatic or think I need to build effective relationships. Like, I just want to be truthful. And I listen, and there's a podcast too, like I listened to a couple months ago, and the dude that said it, he's very hedonistic, very self-fulfilling, but he said, all I do is tell the truth, and I just don't care if people like it or not. I'm just going to tell the truth, because I've seen multiple times over and over again in my life that when I tell people the truth and they know that I'm telling the truth, that they stick around with me more, because they realize that if I just tell the truth, that I'll always tell them the truth, and they never have to worry if I'm doing anything behind their back. And I think that's important in marriage, friendship, business, work, to be able to do that. I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with being charismatic or engaging with a charismatic person, but you take on risk. The author of Dune, Frank Herbert, he said that the whole point, when he came up with the first book, he said the point of Dune is to demonstrate the danger of charismatic leaders. And every charismatic leader should have a warning tag above on their forehead that says, warning, may be hazardous to your health. That is a huge point and theme for Dune. And I think you see that with Slippin' Jimmy, with Saul Goodman. He's charismatic, engaging, and very hazardous to multiple people's health. And that's what I think about that more and more. The more I look back on charismatic people who have done heinous things in my own life, I think like, if I hadn't put so much trust into charismatic traits, maybe I would have been less thrown off when this stuff happens. Anyway, that's a whole nother topic, but yeah, anyway, Better Call Saul, I'd say, see, I'm a generous rater. If I'm rating things, I'm a generous rater. I'm a generous rating person. Maybe I'll say it that way. If I'm reading a book, watching a movie, watching a show, I can rate them generously. So I'd say they're both 10 out of 10. These are two of the best shows ever to come out. Breaking Bad, for sure, I would say is the best show. Better Call Saul, probably top 5. The Better Call Saul is 9 out of 10 on IMDb. Breaking Bad is like 9.3, extremely high ratings. And I don't think you can. I'm seeing this too. My wife and I have just started rewatching Schitt's Creek comedy, and low budget CBC produced show, but their strengths of that show are acting and writing. The writing, the jokes are phenomenal. And the thing is, the acting has to match that. Like, if you can have great writing, if your acting sucks, doesn't matter. You can be a great actor. If the writing sucks, also doesn't really matter. And they hit on both those levels. And that show won so many Emmys. And that's the same with Better Call Saul. Like, it's not the flashiest. It's not the biggest. It's not the most insane. But when you hit writing, acting, character progression, that's basically writing and acting. But like, when you can nail character progression, cinematography, you just can't get better than that. So 10 out of 10, highly recommend. But I'd also say, like, even without the full power of it, you got to go watch Breaking Bad first. But love the show. I think I'm going to go rewatch that last episode, because it just like sits heavy with you. Just like all the pressure and weight from these two shows kind of comes together, boiling together, and then erupts in this episode. And when you first watch it, you're like, I don't know if I like that. And then more time goes by. At least for me, I think, wow, I really like that. So definitely recommend. Check it out. Thanks, guys. Catch you next time.